Let's be honest for a second. When you're deep in the trenches of pregnancy, loss, or the postpartum haze, the last thing you have energy for is endless Googling to find a provider you can actually trust. The Vermont Birth Network changes that for those of us living in the Green Mountain State. It's a dedicated network consisting entirely of local Vermont-based professionals, from midwives and lactation consultants to loss and bereavement support, all across the state. It's scannable, deeply supportive, and focused on elevating the standard of care for Vermont birthing individuals. If you or a perinatal individual in your life needs real local support from providers who are rooted right here in Vermont, skip the overwhelming internet searches, head straight to vermontbirthnetwork.com and build the local team you deserve. Welcome back to Quiet Connection, a podcast dedicated to ending the stigma surrounding perinatal mental health. I'm Chelsea. Today, I'm connecting with Jessica, a mom of 2 teenage boys and the powerhouse behind the Parent Collective. Jessica's path to parenthood wasn't paved with rose-colored glasses. In fact, she admits she went into it a little bit scared thanks to some very real stories from her own mother. But that honesty set her up for a journey of deep mindfulness and communication. Whether you're currently in the trenches of the newborn phase or navigating the grunts of the teenage years, Jessica's perspective on finding your people is exactly what you need to hear today. Here's Jessica. Hello! Today, I'm here with Jessica. Jessica, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
You're great. I love that. I don't often get an "I'm great," so that's nice to hear. No, it's good. You get the typical like "I'm okay" or "I'm doing good," but great is
The sun is shining. Both kids went to school. They've been sick of that, so I'm gonna take the win.
I feel that, and I'm gonna celebrate that win with you. Yeah, both my kids are at school for the first time in a while, so let's hope it stays that way.
No phone
Um,
calls.
oh my God, yeah, please, please. I know I have my phone right there just in case, and I'm like, please don't ring, please don't ring. Um, anyway, I'm really excited to get to connect with you today. And I'm going to ask you what I ask all of my guests. If you could give us sort of an introduction to who you are today and let us know who you were before starting your parenting journey.
Okay. Who I am today, I am a mom of 2 teenage boys. I live in Connecticut. I'm a business owner. I run a company called the Parent Collective, which is very focused on helping expectant parents find support to help them through their journey into postpartum. And, I'm in this sort of season of life where I'm starting to grapple with that phase of empty nester, with a kid going off to college in the fall and another one who, mostly grunts in my direction in, in full teen splendor. So, it's sort of a time of reconnection with who I am outside of being a mom, which
Yeah.
is an interesting journey. And was it before I was a parent? Well, I was who was I? Man, that was 17 years ago.
It's a long
Been
time ago.
It's been a while. I was a traveler. I traveled a lot. I lived overseas for almost 15 years and worked in consulting and partnership marketing, which I think has really informed a lot of the ways that I approach the work that I do now. And, I was a foodie. I am
Mm,
a foodie. I still am a foodie, but I had more time to indulge in that interest. And, I think I just have always been really curious, to learn about different cultures and different, I was constantly planning the next trip. So that
mm-hmm.
think is a bit about me
Yeah.
before ancient history.
In the before times.
Yeah.
In the before times. Well, a few things. It's So comforting to know that grunting and angst just doesn't go away. I have a 10-year-old, so we're in the prepubescent stage, and, we're living by that same kind of lifestyle right now, so yay, I've got I've got more to look
A lot
forward
of
to.
side hugs and sort of
Ugh,
eye rolls. That's
the eye rolls,
where
the
we are.
eye rolls. Also, I am totally vibing with the curiosity and the love of learning and love of cultures. If I could travel, I would. I'm so envious that you got that experience to sort of live and travel just at your it sounds like just at your own pleasure, like, "Okay, I wanna learn about this, I wanna go here, I'm gonna go there."
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
it was it was pretty awesome, and it's really I've tried to instill some of that in our kids, and I mean, my we had both of our boys in England, and so they, had a little bit of exposure to growing up somewhere else, and my son is spending the first semester of his freshman year in Prague, so the fact that
Wow.
he's open to that kind of an experience feels like a win. I feel
Yeah, that's really cool.
yeah,
That's very
yeah.
cool. I mean, I could geek out over traveling and culture all day, but we're here to focus on you. So, another question that I ask that feels really mundane, but it tells me a lot, before we dive into your whole journey. Did you always picture yourself as a mom?
You know, n no, not really. I
No.
think my, my mother used to always talk to me about how hard it was raising kids, especially when they were little, and I think she shared lots of stories that were real, I mean, it
Yeah.
wasn't intended to scare me. It was, this is don't essentially the message was, "Don't do this until you're ready on some level to give up things
Mm,
because, this is gonna be an all-consuming endeavor, especially with young kids." And so the message, I think, was live your life, before you go there, essentially.
yeah.
So, I didn't have rose-colored glasses about parenthood. I sort of went into it a little bit scared because I thought it was gonna be hard, and I think that actually set me up for success because I went into it clear-eyed, and I think my husband was the same. I think he grew up in a house where he did a lot of the parenting, he was, and so, he was very ambivalent about it in advance as well, right? He wasn't entirely sure he wanted to have kids, and I think because we both really took the time to make that decision, I think we were in a really good place, once we decided, to go for it. I remember my mom's stories about her labor were
Yeah.
harrowing, and and and, I think, the way that she described parenting babies was that she liked parenting much more when we were kids, our
Yeah.
personalities started to she didn't love the baby phase, and I think that sort of seeped it. I was just nervous about, how am I gonna knowing my mom's story, how am I going to, handle this? But I think that because I was aware of that, it forced me to really be mindful and have those conversations in advance and share my fears with my husband so that we were sort of able to support each other, in a way that we might not have had we both been like, "Let's go for it." Um,
Like gung ho
so
from the start.
yeah, I mean, once we
Yeah.
decided to have kids, I was super excited to have kids, but it was a journey to get there.
Yeah. But that also is a great example of, like, communication, right? And how I mean, your mom did communicate with you. It was an interesting type of communication because it definitely instilled a little bit of fear, but also, like you said, like, I like to say, like, "Be prepared, not scared." So, at least you had somewhat of an
Mhm.
idea of what it could look like, but then also communicating with your partner about, like, "Yeah, we could, or we couldn't, or we can just wait until we're ready." And I don't
Right.
think any of us are ever 100% ready, but as ready as you're gonna be. So,
Right.
yeah. So let's talk about that a little more. Well, one of the questions that I had too is, did you have any like younger siblings, younger cousins? Did you have any experience with, because your mom didn't love the baby phase? Did you have any experience with little babies?
I have a younger brother.
Okay.
I have a younger brother, but not like we were 3 years apart, so I didn't,
Okay.
um, I wasn't, taking care of him in any real way. My husband had, like, siblings when he was, like, 11, 12, 13, so he was a little bit more hands-on, and I think because of that, he knew how hard it was, right? So he was
Mhm.
also very aware of this is not a rose-colored glasses situation, right?
Yeah.
This is the trenches, of early parenthood. It's like it's a lot, you know? I mean, it's wonderful and beautiful, but it's earth-shaking as well, right?
Yeah.
So, no, I have a very small family. I have no interaction with babies before I had a kid. I mean, I had no idea how to
Okay.
hold a baby, how to anything. So,
Yeah, I mean that I was just
all new.
curious. Just total curiosity on my end because and it is interesting. I'm kind of, like, grateful and almost shocked a little bit just because of the generation difference at how honest your mom was about, like, because a lot of time you hear, "Oh, I loved the baby phase," and then once they get a little older, like, it's harder, or, like, "I loved the toddler phase," and I'm like, "It's all phases, you guys, like,
Yeah.
it all changes." But let's follow the path a little bit. When you guys did decide,
Mhm.
"Alright, we're gonna go for this," you said you got excited, you were looking forward to it.
Sure.
What was that journey like? How was your experience of pregnancy and slash the trenches of childbirth?
Yeah, I mean, I loved being pregnant, especially my first pregnancy. I think the second pregnancy, by the end, I was over it because it was just chasing after. I had my kids 2 years apart, so I was chasing after a 2-year-old, and as the pregnancy wore on, it became just sort of more exhausting. But my first pregnancy, I'm a little bit type A and a little bit, of a doer, and so I just plowed forward like nothing was happening,
Yeah.
and I think it was sort of made my husband a little bit nervous on occasion because I would just, I'd be like, the commute. We were living in London at the time, and my commute was, I an hour or whatever, and sometimes I would just decide to walk for
Oh,
miles, and my my husband was like, you need to you're not who you were 3 months ago, 4 months ago. You need to, like, slow down a little bit."
yeah.
And I remember one moment, where I was just go, 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 and I'd walked home and gone to the grocery store, and I had all these bags of groceries, and I tripped and
Oh,
fell, and this was I was probably 6 months pregnant at this point, and it really that was like I vividly remember it really shook me up. It was like one of those moments where I was like, "Okay, actually, I do need to slow down." Like,
yeah.
I have to sort of be listening to my body a little bit more and not pushing through, which had always been my way. So, but yeah, my pregnancy was great, and not to talk about my business, but we had been a part of this program, which my business is kind of inspired by, called the National Childbirth Trust,
Mhm.
which has been around for over 60 years in the UK, and they create these cohorts so that you can find your group of local parents that are kind of eh, going through, like you were saying, it's like this series of transitions, these series of seasons, and it makes such a huge impact to have a person who's in the weeds of diaper blowouts and sleep regressions. You can have, a friend who's been through it years earlier, and they'll be supportive, but they won't viscerally respond in the same way. So having that group of people, through late pregnancy was huge because I was living far away from any kind of family or friends overseas, and so that became my lifeline. So in terms of my birth, I returning to my mother's, oversharing, I was terrified of labor because of her stories of her birth with me, which I will not share. They were
Okay.
they were not great, and so, I remember seeing my doctor, and we were talking about, vaginal versus a C-section birth, and he said to me, "You know, I can give you all the statistics in the world, but what I've learned over the years is that this decision is entirely an emotional one, not a logical one." And I had just in my mind I was having a C-section, that was just
Mm.
what was happening, and so my birth was amazing. It was this plan, for a
It
type
was a
A,
planned
control-free.
C-section?
Yeah, it was I 0 complaints. It was great. Um, and, then we were just sort of in the awe-filled stage of postpartum bubble. It was amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting to me too because like you said, like you had your pregnancy and birth experiences in the UK. And we've had many guests from the UK and from Australia and where sort of the model of maternal health care is very different.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's very cool to hear you talk about like sort of the inspiration behind your business, which we will talk about because it
Yeah,
is
yeah.
part of your story. But that isn't a typical experience here in the US of like, "Oh, yeah, we're gonna set you up with a cohort of peers, essentially, that you get to navigate this experience with through pregnancy and postpartum," because you're right. A friend can come in and say like, "Oh, yeah, I remember that, and that really sucked." But then you have the person who's doing it at the same time, and you can both sort of look at each other and be like, "What are we doing?"
Yes, it's a very different energy.
Yes.
Yes.
Um, so you had your C-section, you had and for being a type A, I am a planner. I won't go so far as to say I'm a type A, but I am definitely a planner. So to know ahead of time, like, okay, this is when baby is coming, this is how it
Um,
is happening, this is where it is happening. Definitely very comforting to
for
have those
for
things in
me,
the
it
back of
was,
your
for sure.
Yeah, for sure. What those you mentioned the newborn bubble in those first few days. I mean, C-section recovery is its own beast, but, like, what were those first few days, those first few weeks like for you?
They were great, honestly. I think, because we were abroad, and I've heard this a lot from new moms in the kind of post-COVID era, because we were far away from family and friends, nobody was visiting us in the hospital, and so it was just we had this little cocoon, to just sort of soak everything in, which was really nice, and I've heard a lot of parents say that they almost appreciated that they were forced to not have visitors in the post-COVID
Yeah.
era, like, that there was something really peaceful about that. So, yeah, we had, a few days in the hospital that were, just awestruck, staring at this little creature that we're
Yeah.
like, "How did how did we do that?"
I
And
love that.
yeah, um, and to be honest, my C-section recovery wasn't bad. I mean, obviously it was major surgery and I had to
Yeah.
take it easy, and, of course, I didn't take it as easy as I should have, as
I'm
my
noticing a
stories
theme.
earlier earlier with yes. But yeah, it wasn't, everybody's story is different, and mine was not bad.
Yeah.
So, I think for us, we had a couple of weeks that were really blissed out, and, my hormones were all over the place, and my husband would walk into a room, and I'd be just sobbing, holding our son, and be like, "Are these sad tears? Are these, you know, hormone tear like, what kind of tears? Give me
I
what
need some
what's
context.
my reaction to this?" And I was like, "I don't even know. I don't even know what's going on. I'm just a mess." But then so it you've probably heard from other British births that there's, when you're, released from the hospital, you're admitted into this midwifery system where these midwives come to your house every other day and check the baby, check you, check, feeding is going well. And so, they do all of the tests there, your heel prick tests and all of that, so that you don't have to go to a doctor's office, um, which was amazing. And so for, a couple of weeks, things were going really well. My son ended up having some health issues relating to the heel prick test,
Mm.
which sort of burst that bubble, because we were then very in the medical, we were in having all of these tests, and it was traumatic to say
Yeah.
the least.
Yeah.
So, I think that that sort of sparked a little bit of hypervigilance and some postpartum anxiety for me. Being someone that likes to control things like we were talking about, I think that that felt very out of my control. And, so I just became a little bit more uh, hypervigilant. But thankfully, it all worked out. It's just that I think when something like that happens early on, it sort of highlights the possibility that things can go wrong, right? In a way that you maybe aren't feeling when, you see 10 fingers, 10 toes and you think, "Oh,
Yeah.
it's perfect."
Yeah.
Um, so so yeah, that was a tricky transition, especially with hormones and everything as it
Yeah.
was, and my healing to have to navigate that. So, yeah.
Yeah. You had noted one of the things that you had noted, um, was, like you said, that hypervigilance and that anxiety. And I think that something that my therapist likes to tell me, anxiety is because like, we like to get really angry about it, like, "What is this? Why is this happening?" And it's trying to protect you a little bit, and sort of giving, um, validity, and sort of, like, holding space for the fact that, yeah, that you were going through a lot. You're still in the newborn era. You're still in the newborn phase. This isn't Taylor Swift. You're still like, sorting through big hormone dumps, and now you're dealing with medical things. So, that fear and that hypervigilance definitely came from somewhere
Sure.
and was valid. You were dealing with a lot. Did it ever get to a point where you felt like it had more control over you than you had over it?
I don't think so. I think that how it translated, was in my I think that the way that it showed up most was in my relationship and my,
Mm.
trying to control everything relating to our son. And, I remember having, uh, these, one of the themes that comes up a lot with new moms, right, is a frustration that there's an imbalance in who's doing what, right? That's
Mhm.
that's a near universal, conversation that comes up. And I think, um, often about my situation and how I was sort of gatekeeping in that I was doing most of the things, but that wasn't my husband's fault. It was more my fault because I was so controlling over the systems that I had created and how, I, envisioned us taking care of our son that it didn't leave him much room to be a parent. I remember having these whisper fights at 3 a.m., when he would be like, I'm on it, I've got him." And he would go into the nursery and turn all the lights on. I was like,
Ooh.
"What is happening? What are you doing?" And he would, his response was, "I'm a parent too. Like I am allowed to do things my way." Um, and it was a hard lesson. Like we had to there was some time of friction while we kind of established new dynamic, right? One of the things I think people don't appreciate is you go from being two largely independent individuals, right, to now all of a sudden you have to be a team caring for this, it's a huge ballooning of work that has just, shown up.
Yeah.
This totally um dependent human, and with that you have to navigate how you're going to do that work together, right? And
Right.
so I think we don't give enough airtime to that transition and how to navigate it together instead of looking at each other as I don't know, opponents. I guess I think that sometimes happens. So,
Yeah. I'm actually really glad that you brought that up because just like you said, it isn't something that's talked about often, and it is something that, like, as you were saying it, I was like, "I completely forgot about that." And my kids aren't 17 and, like, my kids are still very young. I have a 10-year-old and a 3-year-old, but I do remember I think even if you are and like you said, every experience is different. You can have a super strong partnership and a super strong connection with your partner or with your spouse, but adding parenting to the dynamic, it it derails. It maybe not derails, but it shifts everything.
yeah.
And like, when you said the part about your husband, like, going into the nursery and turning the lights on, I literally felt, like, physically, I was like, "No,
Yeah.
no, no, no."
Yes.
Like, "Don't do that." But just like you said, my husband has said the same thing to me. He's like, "I am their parent too, and I can, like, they're fine. They're fine. I'm doing things my way and they're okay." But you're right, like that I think for a lot of us, or maybe not a lot of us, maybe I'm just connecting here, but like that feeling of control, like we have to do it this way. We have to do it this way.
Yes.
Especially when you have a little one that has medical needs too. You're like, we gotta follow this schedule. We gotta
Well,
do this thing.
I think that there's a lot going on there, right? One of the things is, that I grappled with is like I'll give you another example. Like my husband would come home and he'd say, "I'll do bedtime." And
Mm.
amazing. You got it, right? So I would be downstairs cooking and we had a routine for bedtime, involved, dim lights, soft music, a story, whatever, and I would hear coming from upstairs, like, like, music, like,
Oh
really
no.
blaring music, and I would be seething in the kitchen thinking, "What part of winding down do you not understand?" And I would be thinking in my head, right, "This is gonna have knock-on effects for my day tomorrow," right?
Mhm.
Because I'm home with the baby, he's gonna be riled up, he's gonna sleep differently. Like, I would spiral thinking about all of the ways in which my day and my night would be negatively impacted by not following the schedule, right? And I would because the thing that I was most concerned with by a mile was sleep for me because
Yeah.
I'm not, I'm not well when I don't sleep. I know nobody that was something
I I
that
feel that.
really
Yeah.
that really consumed me was anxiety about sleep. And so, we had a couple of, like, knockdown, drag out kind of brawls about this situation, and he said to me, and I'll never forget it, he said, "I knew you'd be mad, and I did it anyway, and the reason that I did it was because you have all day with him, right? I come home and I have an hour if I'm lucky, to spend time with him. And I want to bond in my way too. And I have, I want to laugh with him and play with him, and I don't have, the opportunity during the week. And so I made a judgment call that I knew this was going to piss you off, but I did it because I'm a parent too, right? Like I
Yeah.
want to have those opportunities to connect and bond with him. And, knowing his motivation for it, right? It didn't lessen my anxiety about not following
The
the system,
routine.
right? But
Yeah.
it gave me a window into understanding where he was coming from. And I think that when you're in that survival mode of kind of, you know, just trying to make it through the next sleep regression or the teething or the whatever, you forget to have those conversations with your partner, right? To understand where they're coming from or what they need, and um, so I think it forced me to loosen my grip a little bit, is I guess what I'm saying, because I was overly controlling about there was a right way and a wrong way. The right way was my way,
Yeah.
and any other way was the wrong way.
Was the wrong
Uh,
way.
so, so I had to check myself a little bit.
Yeah. So relatable, at least to me, and I'm sure to many others, but, like, yes, I totally I totally get that. Um, kind of like fast forwarding a little bit, um, when you did decide to have your 2nd son, your 2nd child, I mean, you didn't decide to have a 2nd son. Um, did you notice any sort of differences in your frame of mind going into the experience this time?
Oh, interesting. Um, you know, I yes, I was and I this is gonna be incredible. I know this is gonna be relatable for a lot of parents listening. I was through most of my pregnancy, I think, really struggling with grief around losing the bond that I had with my first. I mean, just every time I thought about it, just, we had such a special connection and it was just us most of the time. And I could not wrap my head around loving somebody as much as I loved him. And
Yeah,
I was, you know, totally conflicted about how our relationship would change with the introduction. And I mean, it took me most of my I mean, I was excited. Don't get me wrong. I was excited about, this baby and all of it. But I really struggled with that, to the point that my water broke in the middle of the night when I was going into labor. Had a C-section also with that baby, but, I went to they wanted me to go to the hospital for monitoring. It was the middle of the night, um, and I just laid in that hospital bed sobbing because I hadn't gotten a chance to say goodbye to like, I was thinking, "This is my last moment with it just being the 2 of us," and I was still and then the second this baby was born, it was like, ugh, like, but it was a real journey that piece of it during my
yeah.
second pregnancy.
I'm glad that you brought that up. That is something that I think we kind of touch on as parents, especially, like, the more kids you have, and that loss of it's not only a loss of, or grieving the connection that you have with your first child, but it's grieving a version of yourself that isn't gonna
Yeah,
exist anymore, right? There's a version of you that existed before you had any children. There's a version of you that existed when you had 1 child, and now there's a whole new version of you to
right. Well, and
accommodate.
even through the process sorry.
No, it's okay, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, even through the process of being pregnant and feeling like I wasn't as able to be present, right? Like I was nauseous or I was exhausted or I wasn't able to kind of chase him around the playground in the way that I had. There are just these moments where you're struck by, oh, right, this is happening.
This is
you know?
happening, and it's
So I think,
different.
yeah, it's a real adjustment. And I
Yeah,
struggled with it.
and then baby came, because they do, that's what they do, and yeah.
They do show up.
Wha what what was that dynamic shift? I mean, were you able to enjoy a newborn bubble again, or were you kind of thrust back into, "Okay, this is what we're doing now"?
So he was a much fussier baby. Um, and so I called him my little koala because he just sat on my shoulder, and that was like the only time that he wouldn't cry. If I put him down, he would be fussy. So it was a little bit more stressful in those early months just because he was, I remember my husband, I had been adamant about not buying baby gear that felt superfluous and like not, not something that we needed. And one day he just walked into the house with a swing and he was like, "We we need something." I was like, "We can only use that for 2 more months." He's like, "Well, it's worth it if for those 2 months you can put this kid down and he's not crying." So we and it actually was the best thing we just because it did buy me, time. But then, it's just a joy to see how they grow together, right? How they interact with each other, to see his brother be, you know, interested and loving and, just that brother dynamic. You would never know it now if you saw them today, but
No.
they were very cute together.
Yeah, I'm often told by more seasoned parents, remind them when they're older, of the and I'm like, "No, my 10-year-old begged and begged us for a little sibling, and no, she's just never really." I mean, they love each other, obviously, but they fight like like nothing else.
Well,
Like you
nothing gets one of them riled up like the other. It's like they are
exactly.
perfect little angels when they're in by themselves, and they become puppies when they're together. I mean, you can I my children are 15 and 17.
Yeah.
If I take them to the grocery store, I mean, you would think I was there with a 1 and 3-year-old. Like, "Are you rolling around on the floor in the grocery store? Like, what are you doing?" They just can't help themselves when they're near each other. It's really something
Oh
else.
my god. Oh, the image. The image
Oh,
is just amazing. Can't wait. Can't wait. Um,
yeah.
so I'm curious about a few things. Did you still follow the same model of kind of aftercare of having the midwives visit and being in sort of a mom group with similar
So, I didn't do the mom group with my 2nd son because my first one was already in a nursery, and so I had connections with other parents, and we had such a schedule to kind of keep, um, that was I with subsequent kids, they're along for the ride of their
Yeah.
elder siblings. Yeah, right? They just are like, "Okay, I guess we're going to preschool now. I guess
Yep.
we're going to" um, so, that sort of informed a lot of, you know, what he did. He kind of with his brother's friends and, occasionally that friend would have a sibling that was near that was kind of, we'd strike gold if, like, one of my older son's friends had a sibling that was his age. So, yeah, it he no, I mean, I had lots of friends from that first time around, but didn't seek out the same kind of community
Yeah. And that
second time
makes
around.
sense. That makes sense because you had an
Yeah.
established village, you had an established community, like you said, from your first son. I'm curious when the transition happened to coming back to the States.
So, we had been sort of talking in circles about it for years, and we kind of hit the inflection point when our oldest son would be starting school, like school, which is at 4 in the UK.
Mm.
And it became increasingly evident that we were either going to be moving to the suburbs of London, uh, or moving back to the States. And I said, you know, to my husband, I didn't move to London to live in Surrey.
Yeah.
If I'm gonna be in the suburbs here, I'd rather be in the suburbs and be close to my parents. So um, we maneuvered a transfer for my husband's job, and ended up moving when the boys were 2 and 4 so that our eldest could kind of slot into kindergarten, which, was a great it was a great time to move because then our younger one was just starting preschool, and so we sort of got a community through that, and it was just this natural kind of transition point over here, so
Yeah,
it worked.
that, like, flawlessly answered my next question
Oh,
too. Yeah, like, because you had such an established
yeah.
community, like you said, you were away from family, you're in the UK, obviously, unless you had family there, but you didn't, you had family back here. But it sounds like when you came back, you did, you had your family nearby, both boys were gonna be in some sort of school, so you were forming connections, and again, you had community. When did is this when the idea behind the parent collective started, or did that come later?
It came later. I think it came from just I was I had no intention of starting a business. That was not even
As
remotely
so
in my
many of
mind.
us do
But I
not.
but I am, I am a doer, and I was home, I wasn't working, And I'm not somebody that can I needed to kind of throw myself creatively into something. And I had had, countless conversations on the preschool playground with kids, with parents about their experience having a baby here in the US. Just because I was curious about the differences because, I'm a doctor's daughter, and I was really a little bit nervous about the NHS and, socialized medicine and all of that, and became such an evangelist about it. It
Yeah.
was so amazing. In you know, s there are a lot of ways in which it's, you know, problematic. I'm not suggesting that it's, some utopia, but when it comes to pregnancy and new mothers and babies, it it's amazing. And I just felt so cared for in the system, and just with all of the other, like we were talking about the midwives and there's this other program called Health Visitor Program. Um, I just felt so sort of lifted up by the system. And so I was asking people what it was like to have a baby here, just out of curiosity, and just kept being regaled with story after story about how lonely and isolating it was and how they were secretly excited to go back to work because they felt lost at home, and then they felt massive amounts of guilt about that, um and that almost all of them didn't find their people until their kids went to preschool.
Mhm.
And I think, that's such a massive, I mean, it is the biggest transition of your life, right? Having a baby, and to not have people sort of along for the ride with you, I just think is such a missed opportunity. I think, like we were saying, it's such a unique kind of like time warp that you find yourself in where all of a sudden you can't, your best friend from high school sort of takes a back seat to the stranger at the park who can relate to the the nipple on your bottle and what the flow is, right? Like there's just
Yeah.
your your world just 180s. And so that was, it was a few years after we moved back that I was just sort of noodling on this idea of, I experienced this better way, and so how can I help
Yeah.
bring it here?
Yeah, which is amazing. And like you said, I mean, you even said it you said it in the little questionnaire that everyone has to fill out. When you said you're a doer, that was one of your top, like, one of your top things, "I'm a doer." And you saw and now I'm thinking, because I have a Disney brain, I'm a Disney brain, and you said, "See a need, fill a need." And so you that was from, I don't even remember what that one's from, but anyway, you saw a need and you saw a
I wouldn't know.
deficit. Yeah, I mean, I should know. I'm a little disappointed in myself right now. But anyway, you saw a need and you saw a different way because you experienced a different way. Talk to me a little bit about the evolution, how it started and where it is today. What you guys are doing today.
So how it started, I mean, it was definitely a labor of love. I mean, it took years and years for anybody to take us seriously. Um, but, it was sort of years of background kind of just interviewing people, trying to learn the landscape, working with, OBs and midwives and nurses to build a curriculum, because obviously this is my background. My background
Mhm.
is partnership marketing. And
Which is helpful.
yeah, I mean, it was great, and it sort of informed how I, built a community around the Parent Collective. But, um, I wanted to work with doctors and nurses and really understand the reality of that landscape that, of pregnancy here in the US. Obviously, I hadn't experienced it. So, for years, it was just a class here in Connecticut where I live, taught by certified nurse midwives or labor and delivery nurses, um, and slowly started gaining traction with the OBGYNs in the area as they started hearing, because we were totally unvetted. There was no reason for them to take us seriously in the beginning. Um, and so as they started hearing positive feedback from patients and learning more about us, we slowly built that traction here. Um, and then COVID hit, and so that sort of derailed things for a while. But post-COVID began exploring national expansion, looking to, um, essentially local champions that could bring this to their community. And that's been going on for a couple of years. And most recently, we've started exploring, licensing of the program to bring it to health systems and, larger OB practices, so that they can support their patients in a meaningful way. I think there is this sort of feeling among a lot of pregnant patients, right, that they really are clinical, that you're just sort of a number,
Yes.
right? It doesn't
Yes.
feel like your practice cares about your success in the transition to parenthood. It's the, healthy mom, healthy baby, check, right? And I
Yep.
and I don't think that that's what the doctors feel. I think that that's just the perception because the realities of our health system are such that, there are quotas and there are just these realities that don't let doctors spend the time that they want to with their patients. And so, our classes are a way for a practice to show that they care about the whole patient and that they care about their success emotionally as well as physically. I think that that's, um, huge because, there are all these studies that show that if you have one person, like real person, not, someone in the comments section, but a real person to talk to that understands what you're going through and validates your experience, that it can have a huge impact on your postpartum mental health. And so, um, I see the prenatal education piece of the Parent Collective as almost as secondary, really. I mean, it's important for a short period of time, but really it's the sticky stuff that helps you make friends that can kind of
Yeah.
see you through that transition. So,
Yeah. I love that, and I'm also learning more about it as we talk about it because my experience of the Parent Collective, just through, like you said, through social media, is this community building, and to hear that there is a lot of, I mean, I knew to a certain extent that there's this clinical piece to it and training and stuff, but to know that someone like you exists, like, and like you were saying, like, yes, you went through struggles in early parenthood and you went through challenges and you experienced things, but not but and you also didn't come on here today, like, proclaiming, "I had a traumatic birth experience, and like, this went wrong and this went wrong." You told me so many things about what went right, even along with the things that were so really ridiculously hard, and to still have that motivation to look to others and say, "Wow, okay, this doesn't feel right. How can I help others to have an experience similar to what I had?" Like, that is a superpower. That's a superpower that you have, and what you're doing, it is, and what you're doing, is huge, and I'm grateful for it. If you Again, another one of those silly questions, but if you kind of had to summarize the Parent Collective into, like, a single, like, tagline or sentence in terms of what your goal is and what you do, how would you summarize that?
well, Chelsea, I have a tagline, which it is essentially it's birth prep reimagined with your village built in. That's our tagline.
Yep.
Um, and I think that summarizes it perfectly.
I think it does too. And I'm glad that you that you caught my little nudge to to fill in the blank. Um, so, I mean, as we wind this around, again, just what I really love about being able to get to know you more today and know more about your story is, and this is the thing that I think a lot of people don't understand, is like I get a sheet of paper where everything's digital. I get a little set of questions that I have my guests answer, and I learn as little about you as I can so that I can get to know you authentically. And the story that you told today is a very different and very validating story than the one that I thought I was going to get. And those are always my favorite connections because, like you said, you can put all these things down on paper, but when you meet the person and you make the connection, like, it's a completely different experience. So much of what you said is relatable. It's relatable to me. It's going to be relatable to so many people, but I love it when I'm caught off guard. I love it when I try not to go in with a set idea of what I think I'm going to learn about a person, but when it goes like so far off the path and it just is this, I don't know, I just think it's beautiful and organic and I love it. Um to bring us back home, we've talked about it a little bit, at least as we've talked about the evolutions and how you've grown and post-COVID, and I think that shifted a lot of things for a lot of us. For listeners who want to learn more about you, about the Parent Collective, and these will all be listed in the show notes, but where would you say is the best place for them to look?
I think, our website is where our story and our schedule and all of those, where people can engage with the classes is. But I think probably Instagram is where you get a sense of who we are and what our motivations are. So, our website is just theparentcollective.com and our Instagram is the Parent Collective TPC, which are the initials
Yep.
of the Parent Collective. But I think that that's where people will get a sense of what we're trying to build.
Yeah.
Um, in a
That's where I found you, and that's
in
where
yeah.
I mean, it's where I've learned the most about you guys, and I've loved that I've been able to learn more about you and about your experience and about just the evolution of the Parent Collective, so I'm very grateful. Um, I'm gonna bring us home for real this time, and we're, um we're playing a little game, with these seasons, the end of season 6, the beginning of season 7, as we wind in. I'm ending my episodes a little differently. I'm asking us elder millennials to and above to think back to the days before cell
Right.
phones and back before the days when you had to call someone and if they weren't there you had to hope that the answering machine picked up before their parents did because, dear Lord, you don't want to talk to their parents. So put yourself in that mind frame. Remember those days. Um, so you don't know who my next guest is going to be. You don't know anything about them. You don't know if it's a mom or a dad or a caretaker or a provider or an advocate. Don't know what their story is going to be. But you called into Quiet Connection today. They weren't here to answer.
Mhm.
So you're going to leave them a message. And you can literally interpret that in whatever way you would like. Some people interpret that as like leaving an affirmation. Some people literally are just like, hey, what's up? I'm so and so. So glad you're here. Like you can interpret it however you want to. Um, but what's fun
Well,
for me, and I'm going to be checking back in, is that to get your message when your episode comes out, like, next season, you're gonna have to
yep.
listen to the episode
Okay.
before yours and see if the message resonated. That's my woo-woo side that I'm, like, injecting into the podcast, like, so your message will come in the episode before yours, and you'll have to be like, "That hit home," or like, "That was so off the mark." But what would your message be for the next
Oh,
guest?
wow. I think my message would be I think I'm gonna draw on I was on a call yesterday, and I think, my message would be that just to give a reminder to whoever your guest is to, be kind to themselves and give themselves grace. I think whatever phase, of parenthood or advocacy, especially in advocacy right now, which is, a daunting a daunting space,
Yeah.
um, that we need to check in with ourselves and make sure that we don't lose ourselves in whatever season we're in. So it would just be a reminder to, um, take care of themselves before they take care of everybody else.
Yeah.
That would be my message.
I love it. I love it so much. And yeah, we'll see. We're gonna have to see. This is me like trying to infuse a little. I say it's a fun little game. Some of my guests are like, "Oh God, I have to what?" And I'm like, just trust the process, man. Like, but
Just go with it. Just go with it.
just go with it, whatever comes to mind. But yeah, thank you for indulging me, and I'm just so grateful. I'm so grateful that we connected. I'm so grateful that I was able to learn more about you, your story, and the Parent Collective, and grateful for what you're doing. So thank you for spending some time with me this morning.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
I am so grateful to Jessica for her candor today. There is such power in acknowledging that while we love our children, the transition and the loss of our former selves is a heavy lift that we shouldn't have to do alone. If you want to find your village or learn more about the work that Jessica is doing to change the landscape of prenatal education, you can find her at theparentcollective.com or follow their journey on Instagram at theparentcollectivetpc. Be sure you're following Quiet Connection Podcast on social media as well, so you can stay up to date on resources, new episodes, and so much more. If you'd like to share your story on the podcast or through a written feature, check out our website, quietconnectionpodcast.com, or send me an email at chelsea@quietconnectionpodcast.com. Join us next time when another story is told and you realize you are not alone. I see you.